Welcome back to the reading of Calpurnia, Tate, The Evolution of. Chapter 12 is today, a scientific study. There are not many men who will laboriously examine internal and important organs and compare them in many specimens of the same species. The following Saturday, Granddaddy and I left for Lockhart in the gig. The excuse I gave my parents was that I wanted to visit the library. Granddaddy didn't give any excuse. He asked Alberto to hitch up a horse. Even though he had removed himself from the domestic matters, everyone still paid him enormous deference. Invoking his name was like turning a golden key to open doors that might otherwise have remained closed to me. I held the precious specimen in a cardboard box on my lap while he drove. Even though the day was overcast, I had one of Mother's old parasols shading both me and the plant, which was snugly ensconced in a small clay flower pot. I had watched Granddaddy poke a hole in the dirt with a pencil before tenderly easing the fragile green stalk into its new home. We watered it with fresh well water. I felt honored to be entrusted with it. To my horror, the plant began to look a tad wilted on our journey. Granddaddy, the plant looks a little tired. He glanced at it, but didn't appear concerned. That's not unusual, considering we ripped it out of the ground not so long ago. Give it some water from the canteen. Isn't it a grand day for a drive? I agreed that it was and relaxed a fraction. He whistled some Mozart for a while and then broke into song, something rude about a drunken sailor and what should be done to him. To pass the time, he taught me the words. In Lockhart, we pulled the jig up in front of Hoffa's portrait parlor, fine photographs for fine occasions. Once inside, Granddaddy had trouble making Mr. Hoffa understand what we needed. "You want me to take a picture of a plant?" he kept saying. He may have been able to work a camera, but he was slow to catch on to our request. Granddaddy explained again what he wanted. The reluctant Mr. Hoffa said, "Well, I'll have to charge you my usual rate. That's $1 for each portrait." "Done," said Granddaddy without hesitating. Mr. Hoffa looked chagrined, like maybe he was kicking himself for not charging a special plant premium. "All right," he said. "Come back into my studio. Little girl, you wait out here." "No, sir," said Granddaddy. "She is part of this expedition." Mr. Hoffa looked at him and then led us through the curtains without saying another word. In the back were various chairs and chaises and wicker stands. Everything looked familiar, which was disconcerting until I realized I had seen all this stuff before in different family portraits scattered throughout the whole county, the same props used over and over again. Mr. Hoffa fumbled in a drawer and produced a sheet of plain white paper. Then he opened another drawer and found an empty photo album, undid the binding, and pulled out a sheet of rough black paper. "Like this?" he said to Granddaddy. "You want a black one and a white one both? That will be fine." "Okay," said Mr. Hoffa, still having trouble with the concept. "It's your money." "Yes, sir, and soon it will be yours," said Granddaddy expansively, in as good a mood as I'd ever seen him, especially considering he'd taken no whiskey that I knew of. He winked at me, and I tried to wink back, but I could only do it with both eyes at once, which made me look stupid. Another important skill I needed to work on. Mr. Hoffa tacked a white piece of paper to the wall and then placed the plant on a wooden box in front of it. He rolled his big bellows camera into place and started fiddling with it. "Closer," said Granddaddy, "as close as you can get while still preserving the detail. We need to be able to make out that hooked leaf, that one hanging right there." "That there?" said Mr. Hoffa, amazed. "That's what you want a picture of?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Hoffa frowned. "If I move in too close, it'll be a blur. Let me think about this for a minute." He examined the plant from this angle and that. Then he said, "I think we need some extra light coming from this direction. That will throw this part here into relief, and the flash will show it better." He wheeled a cunning rolling rack of stacked lanterns up next to the plant and lit them, 9 lanterns in all. He turned the rack this way and that until he was satisfied with the angle of the bright light it cast. Then he looked through his lens and said, "Okay, this is the best I can do, but I gotta warn you. You gotta pay me, even if you don't like the results." "Yes, sir, I understand." That didn't seem fair to me, but Granddaddy was not troubled. "Even if you can't see that thing hanging there." "Sir, I accept your terms. Here," he said, reaching into his pocket. "Let me pay you now." No, said Mr. Hoffa. "I just wanted to make sure you understood." He filled his tray with flash powder and then ducked under his black cloth. A second later, we heard a soft poof as the room erupted with brilliant white light, stunning my vision for several long seconds. "Don't move around till you can see good again," warned Mr. Hoffa as he emerged from his tent. "Once I had a lady trip and nearly break her darn foot." He pulled a plate out from his camera, turned and saw me and said, "Oops, Missy. I'm sorry about the language. Pretend you didn't hear that, and please don't tell your mama. I'll be back in a few minutes." He took the plate and disappeared into a tiny closet. We could hear him clinking and sloshing around in there, and he emerged a few minutes later holding a floppy photograph with a pair of wooden tongs. "I don't normally bring it out while it's still wet, but I thought you'd like to see it," he said. "Don't touch it." We looked, and there it was, the plant, and, clearly visible at the base of the stem, the very important tiny leaf. Granddaddy grinned. "That's fine work, sir. Most fine." Mr. Hoffa had flushed and ducked his head, and I swear he would have kicked a clod if there had been one on his studio floor. He mumbled, "You like it?" "It's perfect. I'm most gratified." "The shape of that there leaf is real clear." "It's admirable, sir, admirable. Let's do another one." I think Mr. Hoffa would have stood there all day and drunk in the praise he'd earned during this strangest of undertakings. He set the plant in front of the black paper this time and repeated the process all over. I closed my eyes before the magnesium flared, but I still saw dazzling fireworks, even through my eyelids. Mr. Hoffa hurried out with the next picture to more praise. Now that he was part of the project, he peppered Granddaddy with questions about new species, the Smithsonian, Washington, etc. I was putting the plant back in its cardboard box to head home when Granddaddy said, "Wait, Calpurnia, Mr. Hoffa, one more picture, I think." He put the plant on a fancy wicker fern stand. "Calpurnia, you stand on this side, I will stand here." He smoothed my pinafore, and Granddaddy patted his beard. I stood tall and proud in my very best posture. "Hold your breath," called Mr. Hoffa. "Don't breathe now. 1, 2, 3. This time, the flare in our faces could have stopped a rhinoceros in its tracks. The whole world went white. I wondered if this was what snow looked like. Mr. Hoffa yacked away as my vision gradually returned. He carried all 3 portraits to the front counter and was about to stamp his embossed gold Hoffa's Fine Portraiture seal on the lower left-hand corner of each one when Granddaddy stopped him. "Sir," he said, "kindly put your seal on the back of the portraits, as they are scientific exhibits, and the images themselves must remain plain." Mr. Hoffa's face fell until Granddaddy said, "With your seal on the back, the world will still know that you took these photographs. You may put your seal on the front of the one of me and my granddaughter to memorialize this day." He handed him $3 silver. The photographer wrapped the pictures in brown paper and tied them with twine. It was time for us to leave, but he was loath to let us go. He walked us out to the jig, still talking. He insisted on holding the plant in its box while I climbed into the jig. Fascinated, he stared at it as if expecting it to address him. I opened the parasol and took the plant on my lap. And Granddaddy clucked to the horse. Mr. Hoffa stood in the road and yelled, "Goodbye, come back soon, goodbye, and be sure to tell me what happens. Be sure to let me know if they like my photographs." "When we get home," said Granddaddy, "I'm going to write a letter and send the photographs off right away. Then we have nothing to do but wait, which is sometimes the hardest part. Give our specimens some more water, won't you?" On the long drive back to Fentress, my grandfather and I had energy to spare. We burned up some of it singing sea shanties and pirate songs with naughty words, being careful to switch to hymns when other riders came into view. We made it home at dinner time, dusty and warm, but still elated by our day. We put the plant to bed in the laboratory and joined the others inside. Dinner lasted an eternity. "What's news from Lockhart?" said Father. "Cotton futures are up, I believe," said Granddaddy, "and Calpurnia and I had our photograph made." "You did?" said Sul Ross. He looked at me accusingly. "How come you got a photograph?" "To mark a red letter day," said Granddaddy. He looked around the table. "Calpurnia and I may have discovered a new species of plant." "That's nice," said Mother, looking distracted. "What kind of plant?" said Harry. "Please pass potatoes," said Lamar. "It may possibly be a new species of vetch," said Granddaddy. "Oh," said Sam Houston. "Vetch?" Oh, vetch. Bloody red murder raged in my bosom. I wanted to fly across the table at him, but instead I frothed in silence through the rest of that interminable meal. Never before had the obligatory dinner conversation sounded so inane. Never before had I seen my family as such half-wits, such hayseeds, such dolts. The only saving grace was that Father, as a cattle owner, appreciated the importance of a possible new strain of vetch and asked if it could be used for feed, but I was in too much of a snit to pay attention. Finally, it was over, and Granddaddy and I retired to the library and closed the door. He took one of those tiny keys off his waistcoat chain, opened a locked drawer in his desk, and pulled out some sheets of thick cream-colored writing paper. He said, "Light the lamp, Calpurnia. Let us cast some light into the shadowy corners of terra incognita. Let us hold high the lamp of knowledge and expunge another dragon from the map. We shall write to the Smithsonian Institution." I set a match to the kindling in the fireplace and ran and got extra lamps and set them around the perimeter of his blotter, like an intimate constellation. He dipped his pen, paused, and stared into space. Dipping his pen again, he wrote in his old-fashioned hand, August 8, 1899. "Dear Sirs, it has come to our attention during our daily rambles in this small corner of Caldwell County, located in the center of Texas, 45 miles approximately due south of the state capital of Austin, that there may be a new species of vetch, which we have the honor to present to you gentlemen. The plant is, on first inspection, a common member of the lowly pasture Vicia villosa, also known as hairy vetch. However, you will see, as described below, and from the photographs, it took him 2 full pages to describe the plant and the very important tiny leaf. At the end, he signed it, as I looked over his shoulder, "Faithfully yours, Walter Tate and Calpurnia Virginia Tate." He sat back in his chair. "There we are," he said. "We shall see. We shall have to wait and see." I put my hand on his shoulder. He took a slow, deep breath and said, "I thought the day would never come, my girl. I thought I might die before it happened." And there we were, a new species, a photograph, and me, his girl. And that is the end of chapter 12.